When it comes to discussing our bodies, we often get a little uncomfortable. Women's health issues are often seen as off limits, taboo topics we just don't talk about. It's time for that to change. Let's talk. Welcome to the Brave Mama podcast, where we are going to do exactly that. Discuss everything from periods to pregnancy, motherhood to menopause. No topic is off limits. Join Stephanie Thompson, the brave mama and author of The Day My Vagina Broke, as she asks other brave women about their personal health challenges and triumphs. You will learn, laugh and cry as Stephanie finds out everything you wanted to know but were too afraid or embarrassed to ask. So, grab a cuppa and enjoy.
Hello, brave mamas. Are you ready to get the lowdown about everything women's health? I'm your host, Steph Thompson, and I can't wait to share our special guest with you today. Our next guest has lived all around the world. As a midwife, she's assisted women to birth their babies from literally in the jungles of the Solomon Islands all the way through to rural Australian communities. Bernadette's own story has organically led her to have this level of passion for supporting other women in this pelvic health space. So I thought it was pretty fitting to just grab a cup of Madam Flavor's organic mints for this raw and real chat. By the end of this episode, I hope you're feeling more confident to seek some help if you're experiencing any level of incontinence and or prolapse symptoms. Welcome, Bernadette. It's so lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me here.
Let's just call it as it is, right? We are both working from home in lockdown. I have 2 children locked in a bedroom with my husband and a bag of Allen's lolly snakes. You have your husband with your 2 young children somewhere.
No, it's not even a husband. I've hired a babysitter to come here so that the kids could be away, and Ben's just stormed in. So if you're just listening to this, we just started recording and we had to stop and start again because Benj came in and was like, chips! And now I'm like angry that that's happened. So I'm just going to let it go.
Yeah, Mama, that's all you can do. And I know the mums listening right now will resonate and be like, yep, I'm glad you 2 are normal human beings with children and trying to work from home in lockdown. So it's all good.
So
you know
much
what?
resilience and flexibility in the last 18 months. I think everyone listening to this has had to work from home. It's taught us a lot of good life lessons. And also probably
we hear you.
A lot of more yelling in the house, but that's fine too.
So mamas, we hear you, we see you, and if you hear our children, it's okay. We're
fine.
not going to stop again. We're just going to keep going.
We're just going to,
All right. So B, who were you before having these 2 little people in your world?
I was just saying when we started before that I can't even remember because I was B without the mum title for a lot longer than I've been a mum, but it feels like the last 5 years of being a mum is all that I have been. It's so consuming. And you try and explain to your children things you did or what you were doing before you had them, and they can't comprehend that you existed without them, and then it all of a sudden becomes it feels like you don't. But I was a midwife traveling the world and working in many different places. I was a nomad, really. We moved like 13 times in 6 years. We were constantly living everywhere. So I grew up in New South Wales, moved to the Territory, spent a lot of time working as a midwife in both Darwin and Alice Springs, and then remote Aboriginal communities.
Wow.
And then lived in the Solomon Islands on a tiny island that was like 10 kilometers in diameter. We had like no running water, no electricity. Built a leaf hut with just like a chisel and a hammer, like, and from like cutting the trees down in the jungle, dragging them down the hill. It was.
Were Were you delivering babies in that jungle?
I wasn't. The women were, and I was catching them. So I have a real big issue with when people say, were you delivering babies? No, the women were giving birth and I happened to be there. But yeah, they had an incredible hospital that the Japanese had built them. That was really out of place on the island. Yeah, right. And then we would travel around to islands by boat to other islands that had like no facilities. And even though we had this incredible structure of a hospital, we didn't even have like a Doppler or anything to listen. Like we used a Pinards to listen to heart rates and stuff. So yeah, we were there for a year, and and then we moved to Melbourne. And even before that, I lived in New York, and I studied sports psychology before I became a midwife. There was so much to me. I was a marathon runner. I traveled the world to do hikes like Kokoda and lots of hikes through like Central America, lots of volcanic. Yeah, I did really cool stuff. And now I sit in my trackies in my study with my 2 kids climbing on me.
But at the time, as you were traveling and being in New York and the Solomon Islands, I don't know if it was similar to you, but for me, I was doing all these amazing things, but always wishing to be a mum. Always, that's like, oh, but that's going to be my end goal.
Nah, that wasn't me. I didn't want kids.
No,
it wasn't. And I used to really feel like there was something wrong with me for not feeling like that, and now I don't. I could have very easily not had children. We fostered kids when we lived in Alice Springs, and I was really happy to continue doing that, but I never had a desire to have my own children. And I don't know, I just didn't have it.
It's taboo, isn't it? I know you're like stumbling on words there, and I think it's because the societal pressure expects women to just want to naturally become mums and to want that thing. And it's funny because I had this conversation with my mum. I said, Disney's got a lot to play for this, From a young child, you watch a Disney princess just find the prince and get married, live happily ever after, and become a mum. Yeah, that's all she ever does.
Disney can be blamed for a lot of our childhood trauma, I think. But it was, and living in the Solomon Islands, I was 30 at the time, and so I was quite strange to the women that lived there because I didn't have children. And so I'm still in touch with a lot of them, and they were very excited when I became a mother, but they found it quite odd. I think a lot of them thought there was something wrong with me, either mentally or physically, because I hadn't had children yet. 30 was, really old to not have children in the Solomon Islands, especially. Yes. But the average age of a woman having her first baby in Australia is 31. So I got there in the nick of time for statistical reasons.
I was a geriatric mum at 35. I've been working in education. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Obviously, I worked with mums all day, every day because I had their children, and they would either have 2 things to say. Oh, you can't have children, you poor thing, because you've had cancer. Or number 2, you must be pretty selfish. Like it was one or the other. So it was a lot easier to take the path of, we can't have kids, we've tried. Yeah. And it was actually like that, but it was just, it felt easier.
Yeah. And it's funny, the selfish comments, because I've encountered them with not wanting to have children, and also with not wanting to have more than one child. People classify you as selfish, which it's not. There's a lot of thought that goes into both of those decisions, and it's not just you that you think of. So hopefully we can eradicate those comments. But I did have an obstetrician I worked with once when I was training to be a midwife. So I was really early 20s, and I was saying how I never wanted children. And he was like, great, let's go and give you a hysterectomy now. Like, let's go cut it out. Let's go. And it was like really shocking to me. And I was like, I still want my uterus. Like, just because I don't want to use it for making a child doesn't mean I don't want my uterus. But he was kind of like, well, put your money where your mouth is. And obviously, he was right. I ended up going on to have children. But it was interesting that he was like, well, just get rid of that then, because you don't need it. It's like, no, I still need it. I still want it. Thank you.
Could you imagine saying, I never want to get married and love someone? I would just rip your heart out. Yeah. Just like that. That's ridiculous.
It was really, it was really interesting that he...
Oh, goodness.
I think about that a lot, actually, when he just came out with that, like, so quickly.
It's bizarre. It is a bizarre thing to say, for sure. Oh, look, I think, look, obviously I know a little bit about your journey, and if you wouldn't mind sharing. So from a pretty young age, you've had a lot of experience with women's pelvic health personally, right? So I would love to be able to, you know, probably explore that a little bit more, because I know on your website and things you've talked about incontinence from 19, which is very young. What was all of that? What was that like for you to discover that?
Horrifying. It was horrific, and I suffered in silence, really, for over a decade with it. I never told anyone about it. You know, I was a young, fit, intelligent woman, and I wet my pants.
Yeah.
And, you know, and society kind of portrays people wetting their pants as, you know, either babies or older people, or people living with a disability that prevents them from, you know, having either control over their bladder or bowel or being able to go to the toilet.
So were you doing your marathon running at 19, I can imagine?
No, I wasn't, actually. I was hiking a lot, so I'd hiked Kokoda.
Oh, okay.
No, I hadn't even. No, I was living in America at that time.
Yeah, right.
So, no, I'd started running marathons and doing that kind of thing in my early to late 20s. Yeah, I got a lot
after.
more. Yeah, it was after.
So how did you know what it was then?
How did I know that it was
incontinence?
I probably, at 19, I probably wouldn't have given it the title incontinence. I just knew that I wet myself when I sneezed. And then I guess I learnt the terminology as I went into women's health. So I became a midwife I started midwifery when I was like 21 or something like that. I went into midwifery. Okay. So yeah, I probably wouldn't have called it incontinence back then, and I didn't see anyone about it. I didn't tell anyone.
So you didn't have anyone to turn to at 19. Must have felt pretty alone.
Yeah, it wasn't that frequent back then. So I suffer really badly from hay fever, and so it would just be I love how we play it down. It was during hay fever season, so it became something that I associated with that, I guess. I didn't really give it a lot of thought, because denial is a really powerful thing. So if you don't acknowledge a problem and you don't allow yourself to have it, then you don't have it. So yeah, especially as a young 20-year-old, I was like, whatever, and everything else was working fine, so I didn't have an issue, I guess. It's only now that I look back at it and go, I wish I'd done something about that then, because I wish I had gotten on to, and so many people with Core and Floor Restore, which is my business, come to me once they've got an issue, and because we all think we're invincible, and so we all think it's not going to happen to us, and then when it does, it's a real head fuck, and it's horrible, because you realize you're not invincible anymore. And I can remember the same thing, you know, when I broke my hand. I had a mountain biking accident, and I often think about that in relation to my prolapse, how similar the experiences are, because as soon as it happened, I was like, I'm broken. I'm broken, and this can't be repaired back to normal. And so I have this scarring on my hand. I'm missing a knuckle. My hand doesn't work as well as it did beforehand.
That's huge.
It's this constant reminder of what happened, and I get pain and issues with it sometimes, not all the time. But yeah, it was that whole, I've broken something now, I'm not invincible, this kind of, and I had a mortgage at the time, we had a foster child, and I ended up having 4 months off work, and so the flow-on effect and the lesson about consequences and what happens kind of really hit me, and that I feel like I became an adult in that situation, that real, you know, realizing that your actions have consequences for not just you, but for your whole family, and what that means for everybody in the family as well.
It is huge. It is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And I feel like prolapse has been very similar, that kind of same pathway.
Yeah. I do want to jump into prolapse. I want to dig deeper in a minute, but I'm thinking that the career you're in now, do you think that the passion for it kind of stemmed from your experiences at 19 with incontinence? wanting to help others?
Maybe that was the foundation. I've never thought about it like that, because I think what happened, my passion really came from my experiences in pregnancy with incontinence. So yes, it was there, but it wasn't until I was pregnant and the incontinence was horrific and all day, every day. And then my experiences postpartum, when I actually got my pelvic floor functioning properly and able to lengthen and recoil when it needed to, that enabled, that passion to kind of be driven and go through there. Yeah. I think so. Yeah, maybe the underlying kind of reasons were there, but not something.
Not consciously.
Yeah, not consciously. But and it wasn't really, even when I healed, myself and was able to be continent, so not incontinent for a good 6 to 12 months. I never thought about doing this for others. It was only until I started talking to women that my passion kind of grew. And so I started training women in what I had learnt and developed it into a course. And then obviously it's grown from there. And that's where the real passion came from, because I kind of felt like I was the only one going through it. We all do, I think.
Yeah.
When it's
Because
an
we don't
issue
talk
that's
about
not
it.
talked about, and prolapse, I get hundreds of messages from women every day around prolapse, and we always feel like we're the only ones going through it. And so I've brought out a clothing range recently, and the whole idea of it is that we're never alone. And so it doesn't really matter what I speak about on social media, whether it's prolapse or co-sleeping or hemorrhoids or having to wipe your bum so much because there's so much poo there now, when you're not getting that good recoil around the anus and a nice clean wipe. I get hundreds of DMs, and it's because women have always thought that they're alone in this issue, and then when I speak about it, they realize they're not. And so I don't actually really like sharing a lot on social media, but the more you share, the more you heal. And so that's kind of what happened. I kind of just started teaching exercise classes, going, if you leak urine, then this is the way you should do a star jump. And if you've got a diastasis recti, then this is what you can do. And so I kind of just brought those issues into conversation. And as soon as I did, everyone was like, oh, me. I've got this and I've got that and I've got this.
Everyone.
And as soon as you open it, the floodgates everyone starts talking. And I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud that we're creating
So you should.
a society of women who are able to speak more about issues that affect them every day, and really debilitating issues.
Yes.
The women would say to me, I can now go down the street without being scared. Like, that's huge. If you can't go and get huge. Some bread and milk without being scared that you're going to wet yourself, like, that affects your whole life. You're not only not doing everyday things that you need to survive, but you're not doing things that you love, that make you enjoy life. And that's...
Or to thrive.
Yeah. And that's...
Survive
what
or
is the
thrive.
point? We're all dead at the end of this. So we've got to be able to enjoy what we've got when we've got it.
But so many of those mums will rock up to their supermarket with, baby and a smile on their face going, yeah, I love this. This is awesome. But on the inside, they're dying on the inside. So what you just said was definitely resonates with the Brave Mama community too. How as soon as you say something, they're like, oh yeah, that's me. But I don't tell anyone because no one can see it. So I don't think anyone... And... to be fair, a lot of the times they go to get support in a medical profession or, allied health, and are told that it's in their head, or they're told that it's not that bad. So then they think it's in their head, and then they, like you said, they deny, don't believe, and just try and get on with it. But yet on the inside are scared that they're going to wet their pants when they go to the supermarket.
The amount of people that message me and say, my GP told me that everyone gets this and it's just normal. It's like, it's not normal. It's common, but it's not normal. And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that we don't have enough knowledge and resources in this area. So healthcare professionals don't know the answer, and so they dismiss it. And
100%.
I get messages all the time, and it's heartbreaking, some of the things that people are told, and that stays with them forever as well, and they believe it, and then they don't do anything about it, and then finally 10 years later they might find something like what I'm doing and you know, some better information, and they start to feel like they can do something about it. But yeah, that's the power of social media, is bringing people with the same issues together, and they learn from each other and feel supported and connected, which is phenomenal that we have that. And I just think of all the women behind us, you know, in the last 60,000 years that have suffered with these kind of issues and never mentioned it. I mean, maybe they did because women were together more. So surely it was something, I don't know. I'm just, in every culture would be different. Be so interesting to be able to go back and look at that, and whether that was, you know, because there was, you know, like the red tent, or the women would get together and you talk about your periods. But it would be interesting to look at, and I've never, maybe there is information, I'm sure there is, but you know, when my nonna told my mum about periods, it was when my mum started to bleed, and the information she got was, this will happen every month, wear this, done, don't ever speak to me about it again. My mum wanted to make sure that didn't happen to me, and so she told me about periods beforehand, and there was conversation about it, but it still wasn't anywhere near the detail that I needed. So I'm wondering if there was, like, before my nunna's time, when women kind of hung out a bit more, whether it was more open and then we kind of lost it in a generation or two, or whether...
I believe.
I really think that would be culturally dependent. You know, it would be different for every culture, but... I think 100%. That would be fascinating. Sorry, I just get sidetracked with my ideas.
No, that's good. Look, I do want to, because you've mentioned your program, and I want to talk about that a little bit more, because it's called Core and Floor Restore, right?
Yeah. Good job.
And I know you've been working, and obviously it come from lived experience, so you've done it yourself and you know that it's been beneficial to you. Who would you think would be kind of the target audience of women for that, for the courses and types of things that you do?
So I believe that Core and Floor Restore is for everyone. We have a men's program as well as programs that are targeted for women. Ideally, I would like people to have the knowledge of my programs preconceptionally. I would love 19-year-old B to have known what I know now. Core and Floor Restore is about trying to maintain intra-abdominal pressure and work with your whole body. So pelvic floor health is not just about building bulk in the pelvic floor. We know that bulk alone doesn't heal pelvic organ prolapse or stop it. And we know that we're not this, you know, structural unit where everything works in a from up to down kind of force. We are, you know,
it's all connected.
It's all connected with the fascia, and so there's you know, we move throughout in a multi-directional way. And so Core and Floor has a fair bit of theory to it. It's not just an exercise program, and it tries to target everything throughout our day.
So women get that understanding. So people, because I didn't realize that you did it for men as well. So people actually get the knowledge and understanding as well as the practical,
Yeah, so it's learning about your body, how it works. So we're all connected. You can't address one issue by looking at one muscle group. You have to look at the body as a whole. And so pelvic floor health is related to how you move, how throughout your day, not just exercises. So how we pick our babies up, how we put them into the car, how we go from the couch to standing, how we, you know... And then it looks at a lot of things like muscle lengthening, because our society is very obsessed with strength when it's actually not about strength, it's about balance. So we need, rather than muscle bulk in the pelvic floor, you need a muscle that can lengthen. Okay, so for example, let's look at the pelvic floor. When we lift our leg up, when we squat, when we go from sitting to standing, when we poo, when we birth our children, we need our pelvic floor to lengthen. And then we need it to be able to recoil. So, and recoil back into its, you know, normal position, I guess.
State.
Is what it's probably not the best terminology for that, but we need it to recoil. And so our pelvic floor recoils around our anus after we poo. Yeah, so it lengthens to let the poo out. It recoils afterwards to enable for the poo to leave our body. And so people that have, when they go to the toilet and they're constantly wiping poo away, it's because that pelvic floor is not recoiling so well, so it hasn't got that strength to do that as much.
Right.
The fact, so when we birth, our pelvic floor, and I think a lot of people think the pelvic floor is just muscle, and it's not. It's muscle, connective tissue, so fibrous tissue. It's the fascia. It's not just, the muscle groups. Yeah, it's not just a hammock. And so we need to get into that fascia and that fascial release as well. And so a lot of research now is coming out around the fact that a lot of tightness is causing issues. And too tight, yeah. And tight fascia and then tight muscles. And so, during childbirth, the pelvic floor, including all the connective tissue, lengthens by up to 3.5 times its size. Huge. Which is incredible. And then it recoils straight away to enable us to be able to stand within minutes or hours after we give birth. Like, the fact that we can do that, like a human can exit our body and then we can just walk around, is mind-blowing. Like, it's
phenomenal.
It is phenomenal. And the pelvic floor and the reproductive system is designed to be able to do that. But so much of what we do throughout our day-to-day life inhibits our body working correctly. And so we don't use our bodies the way we're meant to. We're not meant to sit on chairs.
Be sedentary.
We were never meant to sit on chairs. We were meant to sit in a squat. We're not meant to spend hours driving around. We're not meant to be hunched over at our shoulders with our shoulders
you
up
maybe
towards
sit up straight then.
Yeah, up towards our ears on our phones all the time. Like, we're going right back into that Homo sapien kind of gorilla posture.
I feel like that.
Yeah, and and knowing how our body is connected, so our jaw is heavily connected to our hips, our neck and shoulders and around are connected to our diaphragm, and the diaphragm is connected to the pelvic floor. So knowing all about that, you cannot address pelvic floor health by just doing Kegels. And
I love that.
Yeah,
you just said that.
Well, it's just it drives me batshit crazy because people are just like squeezing away at a muscle thinking it's going to solve their issues, and it's not. And so, Sorry. I was going to say, do you know, B, back in the very, very early days when I realized I couldn't work anymore as a teacher, I'd contacted the NDIS and said, can people with pelvic floor dysfunction get support? And they said yes, and they did this, hour-long intake call, took all my details, and they said, we'll send you a pack, and then you just need to attach all your medical reports, and then we'll assess it. I'm like, okay, fine, no problem. And then one day later, I got a phone call from a different woman who just said, look, do you know what, darling? Do you know what Kegels are? I'll spell that for you. Just do them, okay? Good luck, goodbye. And that was it. That was done. It's disgusting.
Like, how ridiculous. And I think a week later I received the pack with all the things that I had to send off. So they didn't even think to look at a medical report before making that decision. So I'm so glad you just said that Kegels are not the answer to your pelvic floor dysfunction.
Yeah. Pelvic floor muscle training is a part of it. It is a part of it. So learning how to contract and release properly, but more so learning how to do it with things. Yeah. So core and floor is really about retraining the brain to get that body working better around specific tasks, as well as building support for your body. So exercise is a beautiful way of addressing many different issues. And so core and floor is trying to work on correctly aligning you, because we know when we're in correct alignment, our body, especially our core, has a lot more strength. And so it will support us better in our movements. So 100%. We look at muscle lengthening, we look at posture, and then we use exercise to strengthen. And exercise is a beautiful tool for physical and mental health. And I think that's what I want to bring into this too is core and floor is one piece of your recovery puzzle. Anyone that tries to sell you something that is going to be the be all and end all is just really playing a marketing game with you,
Bit of a
because
grab.
it's not. And I never want to see my program just brought at 2 a.m. and not done. That really upsets me. I never created Core and Floor to make money out of it. I created Core and Floor to give people education, and I had to charge for it because it cost me a bomb to make.
Oh God, yeah.
Time-wise and
That's right.
financially. It still does, because the reason I can answer 600 DMs a day is because people buy my program. So that enables me to spend time doing that. But, every message I answer, I'm away from my children and my family. So I do want to be able to feed them.
This is it. This is the funny thing that I think women in this space have trouble with, because you are working with a very vulnerable, already disadvantaged, unseen and unheard group of women that you don't want to feel like you're taking advantage of them by asking for money. However, this is something that I've learned from a mentor. She said to me, but if you don't, then you can't keep helping. You physically can't keep taking your family's money to help other people. It's not sustainable. And when she kind of put it to me that way, it sounds like exactly what you're explaining. It's not that you're disappointed because you need to be away from your kids to answer a message. It's just that if you don't have the financial support to do that, like be able to hire a babysitter today, then it just can't keep going. And I think I'm so glad to hear that you're kind of working through that hurdle, because so many women need your help and need this program.
And it is only $99, and people have said to me, put the price up. And my biggest thing with Core and Floor is accessibility, and wanting it to be accessible to people. But,
awesome.
Going back to, having if anyone tries to sell you something saying that's going to fix all your issues, it's not, because pelvic floor health is related to so many things. So for me, including your mind and trauma and that psychological aspect as well. So for me, I do acupuncture. I have Bowen to help release the fascia. I have an amazing osteopath, and then I'm trying to work through my shit, because I know that and I don't see a psychologist at the moment. I have in the past, but I know, so I had no prolapse symptoms for a good couple of weeks there. I was feeling amazing. Every time we go on holidays, my prolapse symptoms go. And we came home and I watched The Wisdom of Trauma. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a movie, a documentary. Have you seen it?
Not yet, no.
It's phenomenal. And so I watched that the other day, and basically we're all fucked. So everything we kind of experience in life, stems from our childhood. And we're, I'm a workaholic. I very easily could have become an alcoholic or a drug addict, I think, but I very luckily chose work, and so I love working. I am addicted to achieving and high achieving, and I can totally see that connection with what happened to me in my childhood, and so we watched that movie the other night, and all this stuff kind of got brought up, and straight away my jaw locked, and I woke up the next morning, hips were sore, prolapse symptoms were back. And so I know that I clench my pelvic floor when I'm stressed and when I'm anxious. And then my prolapse symptoms are much more heavier around that time.
You can notice them.
Yeah, there's studies that the more bothered you are by your symptoms, the more bothersome they become. And so I think a big thing around prolapse, and a lot of what I deal with through social media, is what I call the head fuckery around it.
It's huge.
The looking at it all the time with the mirror. I don't know how many times I say, please just put the mirror down. And even the grade system, I really can't stand the grade system for prolapse.
Oh, the 1 to 4 you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. How confusing is that? I'm anywhere between a 2 and a 4. Depends who you ask, depend what report you got, depend who had their hand shoved up in there, calling it the abyss from someone who did a 3 and 4D scan. It really depends.
It also depends on time of day and menstrual cycle and so many different things. I reckon mine would fluctuate anywhere from a 1 to a 3, depending on what I'm going through. And it depends on how you're assessed too. So, you shouldn't just be assessed laying down. You should be assessed standing up and doing things. So I have been assessed, and in the program we filmed it and put it on as part of the program so people can actually watch it.
Good.
picking up weights and squatting. So my pelvic floor moves beautifully with me when I squat and when I lift weights. And so that's something that
Because
I know
you've trained
that
it.
I can do confidently. I'm not doing any further damage. I'm not bearing down. I've got good connection. And, you know, so many people with prolapse especially, but other issues, are so scared to do anything because they think it's going to make it worse, and then they don't do anything, and all of a sudden they've put on 20 kilos, they've got depression, their relationship has broken down or is about to break down, and the flow-on effect is huge, and it all stems back
And that makes it worse anyway.
Yeah. It's, you know, it's I could talk about this with you for hours because there are so many things that stem, like, that feed into it and then come from it. But yeah.
So I love how you said that, you know, that your program is just one piece of the puzzle, because you're so right. It's exercise is just one thing. But I see a psychologist every month. I book it in at the start of the year because I, throughout the 6 years after the trauma, I did it at first, and then I was like, no, I'm okay, and I'm not okay, I'm okay. So preemptively, we've just booked in a year in advance so that every month, if I rock up and I'm okay, then we talk about something else. You know, like there's a lot of other crap underneath that people haven't dealt with in their life that you could probably talk about. But then on the months when I'm not okay, it's just to make sure that that support is always there. The exercise it's a funny thing you say, because I know a lot of women, particularly like me, who have bilateral avulsions with their prolapse, say that, well, if I can't do Kegels and it's not going to make it stronger because the muscle is torn off the bone, then what's the point? Well, the point is, to me, this is something I've learned through lived experience and through being educated, that doing something is better than nothing for all the other elements you just said. So building the strength on what is left, even if it is a little bit, but it's also the mental, it's also breathing, it's also the rest of your core that's sitting there waiting.
And your bum and your legs and your hips, like, it's getting your body to work at its best functional ability for you now. So, you know, it's like saying, I don't know, I can't think of an analogy because I'm sleep deprived, I have a teething baby, but there'd be a really great analogy, and I'll think of it and I'll text it to you after.
Yeah. It's all good. I know what you mean.
Yeah, you don't just not do one thing because of one time. Like, and it's not, obviously, I'm not saying it's a tiny thing to have an avulsion, but, you know, there are lots of other muscles in your body that need that strengthening, as does your mind, and your spirit and your soul as well, you know. And so having a supportive structure around an injury is key, you know.
100%.
To being able to function at your best ability. You may not be able to function at how you want to and how you used to, but you can still be a better version of you.
Well, just be the best you can be, and some days it's pretty good and some days I can't get to the letterbox, but then that acceptance of that too is a process. It's a process. I'm still processing.
It's a part of the healing too, the acceptance. And so core and floor very much teaches you how to modify. And so I always say, do you for today. So some days I can hold a plank really well for a really long time, and other days I'm doing a plank on the wall. And it's about being able to listen to your body. And I think that is something that we have really lost in our culture, is our ability to listen to ourselves. We've been taught from a very young age to just shut it down, block it out, keep quiet, don't let anything surface. And so
put a band-aid on it.
Yeah. And then, you know, when you're pregnant, you're expected to be able to listen to your body. And then with birth, we teach people to be able to listen to their body and just go with the flow and connect. But you've not done that for 31 years. How are you expected to do that now? Like, that's not going to happen. We're the only animal in the animal kingdom that ignores our instincts based on fear of what others will think, which is huge.
The judgment files.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's absolutely massive. So we've trained ourselves to not listen to ourselves. And then, here I am saying, no, you really need to. And so that's a process in itself too. I have people that message me because the program, especially the pregnancy program, it doesn't say do this at a certain time. And we love instructions in our society. absolutely.
Oh yeah, black and white, that's me.
Yeah, tell me what to do, when to do it. And it's like, well, this is your process. This is your character building while doing my program. You need to learn to be able to do what's right for you. And it's often people having their first pregnancy, haven't had children yet. And, you know, because with parenthood, you really learn flexibility and being able to adapt.
Oh yeah.
And so, you know, and I think, and some people won't enjoy the program for that reason at the start. But if you can work through that, then you're preparing yourself for both birth and postpartum.
Yeah. I was going to say that. That's a lot of unpacking of 31 years or 30 plus, whatever, however, before they've become pregnant. That's why I love that your idea that people have this pre-pregnancy. So before they're even pregnant, so they don't have to try and take in another. So they've already got that knowledge and skill leading into pregnancy is ideal. And I want to chat about that. So how do you think we can better support women, not just during birth? There's obviously some birth aspects. And as a midwife, you've had a lot of experience in this industry, in this field of caring for women. How do you think we can better support them?
In what aspect? In order to prevent trauma?
In childbirth itself. So in particular, we've got women who are, like you said, they can't listen to their bodies. And that in particular was me when they said, just listen to your instincts. And I would be like,
where are they?
Yeah, hello, instincts? Are you home? What are you saying to me? Tell me when and where, and I'll be there. Just let me know.
Yeah.
And those instincts never came.
Yeah.
And that's, it's scary when that happens because you don't really even know at the time. So I guess, are there any ways that we can help women, you know, start to become in tune with their body so that they know what they're doing?
It starts from childhood and how you're parented, really. It's how we parent our children to be able to safely experience emotions, you know, and not teaching good emotions and bad emotions, but being able to just feel what you're feeling. And my son can say, I'm feeling really angry because of this, or this is making me feel frustrated. Great, mate. Yeah, you can feel frustrated, but I'm still not going to give you that ice cream. You know, that we've talked today, you've had, you know, for example, you've had a donut. I understand that you're frustrated and you're sad that you're not having an ice cream, but it's not something that we're going to have. Rather than just shut up, or, you know, you're not going to have it. That's the end of the story. That's the end of it. Like, we're constantly, so yeah, it comes from parenting. But in terms of supporting people in birth better, it comes through education and support and knowledge. And it is really hard to find a care provider that is right for you, because we all have somebody that would be right for us, but we may not have access to them and we may not know what they need to be. So I am a different midwife depending on who I'm looking after. I try to cater myself to the person. So I'm not always the midwife I want to be, or why I got into midwifery, because that midwife is only able to look after a very specific type of the population. You have to adapt yourself to that person. And I think a lot of care providers don't do that. And
I don't know any.
Yeah.
Sorry. As in, from the women that I've spoken to, particularly in that birth trauma space, that we have those private conversations with, I share the story of how my obstetrician, the second birth, after the first traumatic experience, said to me, I think you should attempt another vaginal birth, even though I asked for a Caesarean, because I said, I don't want any more trauma to my vagina. I don't think I can deal with more prolapse, or I didn't think it could get any worse. And it was he that talked me through that, with all the risks and benefits of not having a Caesar. When I share that with particular care providers, they're like, oh, I can't believe he said that. Well, that's good, because that's not common. So I think that those two birthing sides of midwifery and obstetrics, that they're not quite besties and they have their own belief systems that are quite different, make it hard for women going in who have no idea that that even exists.
Yeah, when you're pregnant, you enter a very political world.
Yeah, but they don't know that.
And they
Women
don't know that.
sadly.
Most people don't even know what type of care they can get. And so they're in the hands of their GP. They get pregnant, they go to their GP, they do what their GP tells them, or their friends or family. I mean, we're getting better through social media, through being able to educate people. And I did a whole series of free antenatal education classes during COVID, and that was probably one of the greatest gifts I could have given society, because I gave them free knowledge and stuff that isn't even taught in a lot of birth spaces too. So knowledge, we all know the saying, knowledge is power. That's a big one. And then support. But we also have a huge responsibility as a society to have these type of discussions and to support our pregnant people coming up in the next generations, and to teach them well. My son's attended a birth. That is one of the greatest gifts I could have ever have given him. I've normalized birth for him. It's a normal physiological event, and he was there shoving Vegemite toast in my mouth as I was pushing my second son out, like running around going making like birthing noises. We shower, we co-bathe pretty much every day. He knows what my vulva is. He knows the body parts. He knows that I have a vulva. He knows I have a vagina. He knows that I wee out of a urethra, and my urethra looks different to his because his is at the end of his penis. Just like he knows he's got 10 fingers and 10 toes and 2 arms and 2 legs.
And a nose and an ankle.
Yeah. So, that is, we don't shy away from that. Before I had Aloysius, my second son, he saw me in the bathroom with blood. What's that? That's mummy's period. Like, it's just normalized, and I know that will shock a lot of people, but if it's only taboo if you make it, like, it's, and then and children are curious creatures, but they're not, they want to know something, and then it's done, they know it, like,
and then
it's just
you take away that.
If I hide it from him, it becomes this weird thing, and it can become comical or scary, or whatever way he interprets it. I explain to him what a bird is and what a tree is and all the rest of it. So it's just a normal thing for him. And a lot of people, the bathroom is a private space for them, and that's they don't want their kids in there. But then you have to think about how you're going to introduce those kind of conversations later on in life. And so I am sure I'm going to get lots of letters home from our school as he starts educating his peers on
it's probably, I feel like the shift is coming, if it hasn't already landed for some families or a lot of families. I know that sometimes I've even told my close circle of friends that, my children know the difference between a vulva and a vagina. And my daughter has both, and so she needs to know both. Just like my son needs to know he has a penis and he has testicles and a scrotum. It's equal. Like, the woman doesn't have to be, my daughter doesn't have to be more ashamed and private than my son. My son likes to get his penis out whenever opportunity he can, but yet my daughter already knows that she's got to wear underpants. And it's just weird. Like, it's weird how they already know at 4 and 5 that that's the way society works, and we've got to try and unpack that. So, but yeah, I think I've said to my, my close circle of women, Elsie knows what her vulva is, and I can feel they're like, oh, that's a bit weird.
Because most of us didn't even know what a vulva was, and a lot of people don't.
I was just about to say.
Yeah, like, we've been referring to our vulva as our vagina for decades. Like, most people still don't know. I mean, people around me know, because I use it just as much as I use the word arm and leg and mouth. But most people are still like, what's that? And even as a midwife, I didn't use the term vulva. It's only getting into the core and floor space that I've started to do that. So, but yeah, you're right. There is a real shriveled up prude, but that's what we've learned. And, someone said to me once, because I try really hard to refer to people as pregnant people, because I have transgender friends who want to become pregnant, and I find it much easier to be inclusive. It's not hard to be inclusive. So I try very hard to do that. And, I've totally lost my train of thought now of what I was going to say.
That's okay. It'll come back. No, I understand that. That's quite a political thing in itself as well, isn't it? At the moment, it's a bit of a hot topic
Oh, that's right.
I know Mody Body.
Yeah, so we were
Yeah.
talking. I was talking about it with someone because it is a bit of a hot topic, and someone said, to me that your first response to something is how you're trained through your culture and your society to react to it, and then your second thoughts, like those ones that you have when you walk away and go, oh, hang on a second,
Maybe
that's what you believe.
Okay.
And so when this kind of couple of years ago, when people were like, oh, you need to use the term pregnant person, I was part of the Australian College of Midwives for a long time, and we fought really hard to have women put in instead of the word patient or individual.
Yes.
And so because midwifery tries really hard to move away from nursing, and so we tried really hard to have and we fought really hard for the term woman. And midwife means with woman. And so originally I was like, what? Why do we have to do this? It's a woman's thing. Like, why is it another thing we're taking away from women? And I had all, those kind of thoughts. And then I was like, hang on a second. I don't want to upset these people in my life that are transgender. And if I can just use the word people, that doesn't exclude anyone. But if I use the word woman, it does. And so it's the same thing, the way when you're talking about stuff like the vulvas and your friends kind of had that initial, that's just how we were brought up. But then if they go away and if now that you're thinking, oh, actually, what do I actually think about it? If you give yourself that space to go, what do I think? Rather than what am I trained to think? Yeah, people can kind of come to terms. Most people are pretty progressive and open.
Yeah, and I think that can of worms was definitely opened recently with Mody Body, how they've said for people who bleed, and they didn't say women because obviously their underpants are for people with periods.
Yeah.
And they just couldn't win. Like, one side are copying massive backlash from women saying it's just a women's issue, and then the other half was saying, well, it's not inclusive and it's not fair. And I'm so glad they stood their ground. It's people. Yeah. It's humans.
Yeah. I love.
You don't actually have to have
Mody Body's
female, woman.
philosophy and their advertising is phenomenal. They are super progressive, and I love what they're doing. And it takes a few of us in these kind of, we're in that transition stage where there's a couple of people with their fires lit heading the way, and the more people will come in. But we're also in a really volatile space at the moment in our life. This is
oh god, yeah.
And we've got more to come. So it's going to be interesting, and I think if I can choose kindness, and I may not like somebody else's opinion, but I will never mock it, because you'll judge it. Yeah. That would teach my children that opinions don't matter, and that you can be unkind to people based on how they feel, and that's not right. And I make mistakes every day as a human, but I try really hard to model, because our kids learn through observation. They don't learn from what they're told. And so if we can model that kindness, and they pick up on every single conversation that you have in front of them. So
as you said that, I thought, oh God, my kids are doomed. All I've done is yell this morning. All I've done is say, for fuck's sake.
Oh, my kids, they hear that too. My son uses fucking contents much more than society would probably like him to.
I tried to whisper, and I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake, like that. And then my son just goes, fuck's sake. And I'm like, oh God. But you just get to the point where, damn it, and goodness me, just don't cut it. You need a good for fuck's sake.
There's a lot of research behind swearing that it's good for us. So,
oh gosh, look, I know we've kind of gone off a little bit.
We've gone off a lot. You had some really good questions that we probably need to get into.
I do, because I know that for women, they really want to hear you speak, B, because you've got all this knowledge and understanding of pelvic floor and midwifery. Like, it's such a bonus, you're a bit of a package deal here. I want to try and get all your knowledge into this episode. I do want to talk, and I know you and I have spoken many years ago when your first was just a little bubba, particularly around the birth trauma space, right? Because obviously midwifery, you've probably seen the good, the bad, and everything in between when it comes to women birthing their babies. I almost just said people, and I got a bit stuck. Sorry, yes. See, and I want to correct myself because I do. I want to be inclusive as well, but it's something that I'm still learning.
Yeah,
it's still
it's a
new to
journey.
me, and
it's a journey, and it's
So, all right, we'll start that one again. So for people who are birthing their babies, obviously you've seen everything in between. I think that. Well, do you think that people who are pregnant and their partners, are there things that they can do? And I know you've talked about being educated, but are there things to try and minimize risk of trauma during childbirth, during vaginal childbirth?
Trauma is... It depends on what kind of trauma you're talking about here, because there are many definitions of trauma around birth. I firstly want to say that I feel like birth unfairly cops the blame for a lot of pelvic floor trauma, if we're going to be specific here with trauma.
How do you mean?
So for me, I had chronic constipation as a child. I was severely constipated. I had hay fever, okay? My pelvic floor had damage to it well before I even became pregnant. I exercised incorrectly for a really long time. So my pelvic floor sustained injury before I was pregnant. I then had a pregnancy with hyperemesis. I vomited all day, every day. I've had two epic births with no coach pushing, no episiotomy, no tearing. I've never torn. I've been intact twice. I have had no forceps or instrumentals. I have had epic births, and I'm very, very grateful for those. I have pelvic floor damage because of the things that happened pre and post birth. So constipation, hay fever, exercise, hyperemesis, vomiting, coughing. I truly felt my fascia tear during my second pregnancy with a cough. I had a cough for 6 weeks and I could feel it tearing, and I honestly believe that's what did the damage and made my prolapse symptomatic. I feel like I would have had a prolapse between I feel like I would have had a prolapse, but it was never diagnosed after my first birth. And I don't think it was the birth that did it. I think it was the pregnancy and all the vomiting. So,
and the years leading up to it.
Yeah. So I don't feel like everyone goes into birth and pregnancy and birth with a perfect pelvic floor health. We can't. The way we move and exercise and the way we poo damages our pelvic floor. We're not meant to poo on a toilet we're meant to poo in a squatting position because that enables the pelvic floor to lengthen properly. I think the amount of anxiety that is rife in our society plays havoc on our pelvic floor. So I can't say that pelvic floor is this huge, addressing pelvic floor health is holistic and then issues are just created by one cause. No one thing is the root of all issues. So yes, for some people, especially those that have avulsion and have forceps and episiotomy, there will be damage to the pelvic floor, including organs around it and, like the clitoris. Like most people don't know when they have an episiotomy, it cuts into clitoral tissue. We only know the structure of the clitoris from research that came out in 2005. But prior to getting an episiotomy, you don't get asked, is it okay if I cut into your clitoral tissue? So there's no knowledge around those kind of interventions. So firstly, I want to say that. I want to take the blame away from birth completely. Birth is one aspect that creates trauma, but it is not the only thing.
The second That's actually such a light bulb moment for me. Thank you for showing that, because I was like, as you were saying, I'm like, I did triathlon before babies. I used to get constipated. I was super anxious. Okay, yeah, maybe, do you know what I mean? Like, it just gave me that food for thought that it wasn't, obviously forceps, avulsion, yes, in birth, but potentially there might have been some underlying things there anyway.
So you go into your birth with a pelvic floor that's not functioning correctly, yeah? So the pelvic floor, not just the muscle, but the fascia, the fibrous tissue, has to lengthen and then recoil. if you go in with any type of pelvic floor dysfunction, which I'm going to say almost all of us do, to then walk away with no damage is, I hate the term unicorn, people putting the term unicorn on everything these days, but you are going to end up with some kind of dysfunction that you need to address. And hopefully it's not a prolapse where that issue is, those symptoms will probably be with you, at some point on and off for life. But, I think education needs to come around that and correcting that pelvic floor health and having optimal health in that. So obviously preventing things like forceps and episiotomy and instrumental births and, the way women push, we shouldn't be coaching women to push out a baby. Your uterus pushes the baby out. If you are bearing down for 2 hours or longer because your care provider is telling you to, that is a lot of strain on that pelvic floor before it then has to lengthen and then recoil for you to be able to stand up again. So, the whole maternity care system needs to evolve and enable birthing people to be able to birth the way that we were physiologically meant to and the way we were put together. And it's not happening. Women are not, are on their backs. They're, if you're on your back, you're closing the space of your pelvis. And we may only be talking millimeters to centimeters, but that is huge when it comes to a head and how your baby fits through. And then there's, so much fear around the size of the baby. The size of the baby is one tiny part compared to everything else that your labor and birth needs to work in order for you to birth that baby. So look, I could speak to you about this for like 20 hours straight and still not be covered.
I feel like we need another episode just on birthing itself, right? Like the lead up, the pregnancy. I'd love to actually have that opportunity to talk about your pregnancy course, because I still remember, Bernadette, that when we first spoke all those years ago, you said to me something like, do you know the apple tree and the shake method? I know I'm saying that wrong because it's so long ago.
The shake your apples,
Shake your apple. I'm like, what's that? Why don't I know that? Because I felt like I'd covered every book and every website and every bit of information that I could get my hands on to do this labor.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, what's that? And I think, wow, that would have been so helpful. So I feel like we need another whole entire episode specifically on pregnancy.
Because we train women around, how to manage the pain. Like the pain has become this big factor. The pain and the size of the baby, I feel like that's all that matters in birth, when it's not. So we talk about the 3 Ps, so the power of contractions, the passage, which is your pelvis, and then the passenger, which is the baby. And so there are so many different ways that you can approach all of those things to make sure they work as efficiently as possible. I'm not saying that if you do everything in your power, you're not going to end up with damage. And obviously that depends on how your body has entered birth as well.
And the baby. And
but also like your pelvic floor health and all the rest of it. And, that's why I'm a huge believer in having treatments like osteopathy and myofascial release and stuff like that in pregnancy to enable space. Like the more space we have, and then just we're not meant to labor for 12, 24 hours. That biologically does not make sense. And so, and then with pushing. And so I think our maternity care system fails birthing people every moment of every day. And I think it has a lot to do with the trauma, and not just pelvic floor trauma, but then also emotional trauma that comes from birth. And
oh God, yeah.
That is a whole nother episode too.
It is, and it's on the rise, and people say, are we just talking about it more? And I'm like, no, I think it's happening more and more. Just like you said, the messages I get every day from women who have had very similar, almost identical experiences to myself, and it feels like it's becoming more common.
Yeah.
And more common. I don't know how.
We're practicing more fear-based medicine because that fear of litigation is rising. And we've just totally forgotten about how the body works in labor, and we're not addressing it. This is a normal physiological event. It's not an issue that needs to be treated. And so we don't coach people, other things. We could, I feel like
it's a can of worms. I get it. I totally get it. And it's
something I'm obviously really passionate about because I've experienced the epicness, not just myself. Obviously, I've had 2 epic births, but I've been with plenty of people who have had amazing births. And so I know when you don't get one, what you're robbed of. And you shouldn't be, because birth should be the most empowering event of your entire life. And for most people, it isn't. And if we are sending you into motherhood with trauma, how does that then flow on to our society? What does that do for your relationship with your partner, your relationship with your children, your partner's relationship with your kids, and then everything else? And so we need to fix birth. We need to
Yeah, that's a huge task, and that definitely is something that Brave Mama wants to work on by the time my girl's ready, if she chooses to have a baby. You know, she's only 5, so we've got a little while, and I think it's going to take that long, to be honest. From what I've learned already just in these past 5 years, that it is very political, like we've said. It's also very emotive. People have their beliefs and they're very passionate about their beliefs. It's very hard for people to hear other people's perspectives. I mean, quite often, I'll share with you that many women who have said to me, if I had done this, and this, I probably wouldn't have, in terms of that natural birth advocacy side of things, I wouldn't have experienced trauma. And I generally find those people who tell me that haven't had birth trauma. They've had amazing epic births, and I love that, like yourself. They've had these empowered births, and they've done all the techniques that they've learned, and it's worked for them. And so, of course, they want to support women to do that. But we just are then dismissive of people who didn't get to have that. And I just find it's very complex.
It is very complex. And same with pelvic floor health. And that's why, I want to kind of shift, because if people go into birth with fear, then that is going to have a flow-on effect with their experience. And so we really need to understand pelvic floor health a bit better, and not go into birth thinking that, going into birth being prepared as physically and mentally best we can is key.
Yeah, look, I know you've answered this already, because I know one of my questions was, do you think we should be teaching our young girls more about their bodies and pelvic floor prior to pregnancy? Of course, the answer is yes. But, and teaching our girls about their anatomy, what age do you think would be appropriate? So, for example, this is for me selfishly. My daughter's 5. At what age could I be talking to her about her pelvic floor function?
It's trying to bring it into everyday topics. Like, so with, I know in prep or kindergarten, they're now starting to talk bring in sex education, and all it involves is giving things the right terminology. So calling it a vulva. But I teach the Ulcha method to be able to poo. It's something that I teach and talk about a lot. And so, you can bring that in. So when you poo, your pelvic floor lengthens. It's a muscle in your body. If you're talking about other muscles with kids, then bring in the pelvic floor as well. It's that kind of thing, because we need to normalize it and not have it as this thing that we fear or we're scared of either. And so, if we bring that agenda to it, if we're teaching our girls that because we're terrified that they're going to end up with issues, then that's probably going to backfire, because kids always, go against what their parents are trying to teach them. But
it's so true.
Yeah, if it becomes a normal part of the conversation, so, look at your arm muscles, that they're lifting this, amazing thing. And then when they're on the toilet, that you've got a muscle in there and it opens so that your poo can come out. How cool is that? It's just that kind of stuff, and then
I needed to hear that yesterday when she was stuck. I was trying to get her to do the mooing like I do, which is probably similar to what you just said. I was like, put your hands here and make the noise and open your mouth. And she was doing it, but it was, and then I felt really bad for her. I thought, am I, like I said, am I teaching her too much? Is she going to go to school and start mooing in the toilet and then everyone laugh at her? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm not a fan of moo to poo, because it doesn't involve the cha, and the cha is the diaphragm pushing down, which is then that involuntary pushing and prevents the straining on the pelvic floor. So have a look at cha. But the cha, yeah. So the cha makes the diaphragm contract, and so you're not actually straining that pelvic floor.
Okay, I will. I promise you I'm going to look it up.
But yeah, if you're telling her to do it rather than showing her, so if she sees you do it, she'll
they
learn.
hear me.
Yeah, so they'll learn more. She'll learn more about it. There was something that just came to my head though, and I've forgotten. Oh, postpartum brain really sucks.
It's all right, Mama. Take your time. It's, you know what, while you think of it, and then just jump in, because I do want to ask you one more thing. So we've got all of our people listening today, and if they wanted to find out more about, you know, your courses or the information that might be suitable for them, where could they find you?
So Instagram, Core and Floor Restore, and then my website, just coreandfloorrestore.com.au. I'm not really that active on Facebook, but I do have a Facebook account too. But yeah, website and Instagram are pretty big. And then I do one-on-one consultations, and I've started working into the birth debrief space as well.
I saw that just yesterday, I think, and I thought, what a brilliant idea, because you've got the knowledge, the background. It's like a multidisciplinary team in one person, Bernadette.
But try, because a lot of the inability to connect with the pelvic floor, if there's trauma there, is huge. So the body goes, nah, or the brain goes, nah, I don't want to go there. And so people that have experienced birth trauma often really struggle to connect to the muscles. And so I've started to bring that in, because I'm a midwife and I can work through debriefing births and answering questions that people often have, but also because it is another stage of healing as well.
Where do I book in? Where do I go? Go to the website.
I reckon we need about 8 hours, and we just end up chatting. We need a weekend away.
Yeah. When the world opens up, let's do a retreat. Let's do a, post debrief retreat. I have probably a few 100,000 women who would like to come.
That's another thing I really want to do with Core and Floor, is work into retreats, because it's a lot of information to learn how your body works and to unlearn things. That's what I was going to say. It's come to me now. A big thing with girls is the sports that they play. And so gymnastics and dancing. And so if you're concerned about your child, teaching them how to actually use their body properly is the best thing you can do for their pelvic floor. So we are not meant to suck our belly buttons in. So if you look at a gymnast before they go and do their routine, they suck that belly button into their spine, bring themselves really trim and taut. And that doesn't allow for any dynamic movements in the body. You're holding a pressurized unit really taut, and so that puts a lot of pressure on the fascia and the muscles in that downwards kind of movement. And so that's the big thing with being able to control your intra-abdominal pressure with Core and Floor. And so I danced my whole life. That would have done huge damage to my pelvic floor. Always sucking in and holding it tight. It doesn't allow for the flexibility and movement that our body needs. And so choosing your children's sport carefully is key. 28% of elite athletes are incontinent, and Olympus gymnasts are obviously the highest.
Wow, I never knew that. That's a bonus. There you go. If you stayed listening right to the end, that's a major bonus.
Yeah. So, that shows us that it's not just about strength. These people, are not moving their bodies correctly, and they're not doing their bodies justice.
Because they're the strongest people I've seen on telly during the Olympics, the gymnasts and the runners, and
And you look cool. There's videos of powerlifters wetting themselves as they're lifting, and people encouraging them, and that's okay. It's normal to do that. No, that's not normal. Your body's not working correctly, and so therefore you should not be doing what you're doing. But
it's hard.
They'll be in a
what an insightful chat. I really thank you. I love it, and I think we need to book in a fair few more, but we might leave it there for today, because I know you'll probably have your little one to get back to, and I just heard mine run out the door and kind of slam it open, and I'm like, okay, I've
got a consultation now, actually, so I do have to go.
Oh, bless. Bernadette always has so much to offer. I absolutely love her passion for wanting to know more about how we can be doing better at supporting other women. And even though her programs I don't feel are overly expensive compared to the others on the market, she's still wanting to offer a special discount for our listeners. Just see below in the show notes with all of the links and discount codes. In our next episode, we're going to be sticking with the theme of women's bodies and pelvic floor exercises, health and fitness. Join us for our chat with Hayley Wildsmiths from Auckland Hyperpressives.
Mama.